Hello, my name is Abby Jones and I'm the Vice President of Legal and Policy at PennFuture. PennFuture is a statewide environmental advocacy organization. Our mission is to lead the fight for a stable climate, clean air, and pure water through legal advocacy, policy engagement, and by empowering all Pennsylvanians to build sustainable communities and a clean energy economy for future generations. Today, I'm going to talk about the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, DEP's Environmental Justice Public Participation Policy and Screening Map. There is currently an open public comment period on the interim final policy, and I'm hoping to give you some background and context of this policy and hopefully provide some guidance if you choose to submit comments. Real quick, I just want to take a minute to ground ourselves in what DEP means when it talks of environmental justice. DEP's definition of environmental justice, in full here, highlights justice, equity, and inclusion principles and recognizes that cumulative and historical burdens of pollution, racism, and classism, as well as larger impacts such as climate change, have led to many communities in Pennsylvania suffering a disproportionate impact of the environmental and health harms and pollution burdens. It also critically recognizes that environmental justice necessarily includes the prevention of future environmental injustices and the removal of the disproportionate burdens on these communities. And so while I think many of us know that DEP is a state agency responsible for environmental permitting and enforcement of our environmental laws, we may not be fully aware of what the Office of Environmental Justice, or OEJ, does. The OEJ is part of DEP, and they are responsible for implementing DEP's environmental justice policy. They have 6 regional offices across the Commonwealth, as well as centralized staff. And while the OEJ staff are the ones going out to the communities and carrying out the policy, DEP is the one who wrote the policy. I say this because sometimes I'll talk about DEP and sometimes I'll talk about OEJ, and for the purposes of this presentation and our comments, they should not necessarily be considered the same entity. So what is DEP's Environmental Justice Participation Policy? It sets forth the policy for enhanced public participation for environmental justice communities. It outlines the actions the agency needs to take to ensure that environmental justice communities are informed and included in the DEP permitting process. But it's important to note that this is just a policy, meaning that it is, unfortunately, merely guidance and does not necessarily binding, nor does it carry the full force of law. The last version of DEP's EJ policy was written in 2004. DEP finally offered a revised policy in 2022, and based on feedback from the comment period on that draft, issued the current interim final policy, which is currently up for public comment. Basically, the policy sets forth definitions, expectations, and procedures for OEJ, the applicant, DEP, and the community to carry out an enhanced public participation process that is designed to be more inclusive of and responsive to the EJ community in which a new polluting facility is being proposed. Now, I don't have the time to walk through every page of this policy during this presentation, but some of the main points of the EJ policy include a list of trigger permits that, as the name implies, trigger DEP's application of this policy, criteria for opt-in projects or permits that may also trigger the application of the policy, identification of an EJ area and areas of concern, the process to inform the EJ area and the community members that an applicant is applying for a permit from DEP to build, operate, or modify a facility that will impact the public health or environment, and processes for community notification and enhanced public participation in the permitting process. So what is DEP's PennFuture screening tool? In addition to the written policy outlining the process for enhanced participation, DEP's interim final policy also includes a newly revised mapping tool that identifies where EJ communities are located in Pennsylvania. This interactive mapping tool provides information that can be used by both DEP and the public and includes the ability to search specific addresses. The biggest change in the PennFuture Screen tool from previous DEP EJ screening tools and maps is the way that EJ communities, now called EJ areas, are identified. Previously, an EJ area was based solely on census data. Now, an EJ area is based on a formula that includes 32 indicators that make up either pollution burden or population characteristics, and the methodology that goes behind this calculation is available for review, although it's extremely technical. As you can see here, the final score, which identifies an EJ area, is the pollution burden multiplied by the population characteristics. In short, if any census block with a final PennFuture score of 80% or greater, they are designated an EJ area under this policy. Now, we've noticed that this change has resulted in some previously identified EJ communities no longer being recognized as such. This is problematic, but this type of more holistic approach to EJ screening is being adopted by the federal EPA and other states and really takes into account the historical pollution burdens and the characteristics of the overburdened population. In addition, as I'll talk in a little bit, there may be opportunities for communities that might not have an 80% or higher score to opt into the policy. So how is DEP's enhanced public participation policy supposed to work in practice, right? We know what the policy says, we know what the map looks like, but how do we expect it'll actually work? Step one in the process is to look at the PennFuture screen map to determine if a project is proposed for an EJ area. This can be done by the applicant, OEJ, and/or DEP. Now, if a community finds out about a project being proposed but does not have a score of at least 80%, as I just mentioned, our understanding is they can petition the OEJ to opt into the policy, meaning they can try to get the enhanced public participation policy applied to their community. The DEP and applicant will also hold a pre-application consultation meeting. This is something that DEP really does for all its permits, but the purpose here is to specifically include discussion of the EJ policy and EJ considerations. Next, DEP determines if the proposed permit is a trigger permit. There is a list of trigger permits in the policy. And what a trigger permit means is basically that the specific enhanced public participation measures set forth in the EJ policy must be followed for that project. The EJ policy also lists a number of opt-in permits or projects, which are defined as projects which DEP determines should be evaluated utilizing this policy based on identified community concerns, present or anticipated environmental impacts, or reasonably anticipated significant adverse community environmental burden. That's straight out of the policy. So now, assuming that we've gone through these first few steps and the EJ policy applies to the community and the project at issue, this is where the enhanced public participation process begins. This includes public meetings held between the applicant, DEP, OEJ, and the community members, development of community relation plans, fact sheets and other information or education projects, and permit application and approval processes, community access to the application materials, and opportunities for the community to give comment and express concern. This is what the policy is really giving or trying to give to the environmental justice community. Information, understanding, opportunity, and hopefully this all results in DEP considering these comments as part of the permit review process. And then once DEP has done its permitting, it will also issue a formal response to comment document, which responds in writing to the comments and concerns of the community made through this enhanced participation. Since there is an open comment period on this environmental justice policy and screening tool, I want to use the rest of our time to let you know some of the main concerns that PennFuture has identified with this policy, including suggestions on how you can comment on those concerns. If you're interested, PennFuture submitted extensive comments on the 2022 draft of the EJ policy, and those comments can be found on our website through the blog page if you just search environmental justice. Unfortunately, no changes were made to the policy based on our and others' comments, and so they are still applicable to the interim final policy. Issue number one, This is just a policy. It is only a guidance document for the agency. It is not a regulation that they or the applicant needs to follow under the law. Therefore, DEP must undertake a rulemaking with the Environmental Quality Board to make its policy a regulation which carries the full force of law. Issue 2. Concerns about whether the enhanced participation is really meaningful. This process sounds good in theory, but will it actually work? Could it be streamlined, improved, and so on? Here we encourage folks to identify processes that might work better for their specific community. Do you have internet or travel issues in rural areas that need to be considered? Are there potential language barriers? Do you have ideas on how notice and providing information to the community can be improved? If so, we encourage you to include those in your comments. Additionally, we think that the policy should provide for financial and technical support to ease the burden on the EJ community members in participating in the process. Issue number 3, and this may be my personal biggest sticking point. The EJ policy as written has no teeth. Besides being just a guidance document and not a regulation, this policy fails to provide any recognition that DEP must deny or modify permits that could disproportionately burden the EJ community. So basically we have a comment process and there's little that DEP feels they can do with that information to protect the community. However, PennFuture and others believe that the legal and constitutional authority and duty of DEP to deny permits is already there. DEP just needs to exercise that authority they already have. Issue number 4. It doesn't seem all that easy for a community to know if the EJ policy applies to it. While the Penn EnviroScreen map is helpful, this technology comes with its own inherent problems, including technology access issues and being able to distinguish the colors on the map. If you'll notice when you look at it, the darker colors it's hard to tell really. And although OEJ staff is doing a great job of proactively reaching out to our EJ communities, this policy can place a burden on community members to know if they should be a part of this policy or to understand why they may not be considered an EJ area. Issue number 5, the area of concern is just too small. The area of concern under this policy is set arbitrarily at half a mile from the proposed project site, but we know that the pollution can travel much farther than that. Therefore, we suggest that DEP develop the area of concern on a project-specific basis, reflecting not only the pollutants of concern and how they operate, but the geographic area as well and the circumstances that could impact the pollution. Issue number 6, lack of accountability to follow the policy. This is very closely related to the fact that this is just a policy and not a regulation, but there does not seem to be any real accountability written into the policy should DEP or the applicant fail to comply. Therefore, in addition to making the policy a regulation, we believe that the policy should include enforcement actions, penalties, and other measures for failure to comply. Finally, and I think this is an incredibly important point, as I have it highlighted here, but it's important to include any positive comments that you may have. DEP is going to be getting a lot of negative feedback on its EJ policy, so it is important to let the agency know that we wholeheartedly support the fact that DEP is attempting to do more to ensure environmental justice in Pennsylvania and to protect our EJ communities from further harm. And I want to be clear that I think that OEJ staff is fully committed to meaningful environmental justice for our communities, and we should continue to support all of their efforts. And we can do this, of course, all while urging DEP to do more to protect environmental justice communities and to stop environmental injustices from continuing. So at PennFuture's urging, DEP has extended the written comment period to November 30th. And while OEJ's in-person and virtual public hearings have all been completed at the time of this presentation, we are hopeful that DEP will also heed PennFuture's request to add more hearing dates, and we'll let you know if that happens. Written comments can be submitted online or mailed to DEP directly. I want to thank you for your time today, and don't forget to submit your written comments to DEP by the November 30th deadline. Thank you.